How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and in today's video I have some exciting plans for the future of the go-kart here. I have some really cool updates that I want to share with you guys and possibly get some insight from you guys on some new things that I'm going to be adding to the go-kart and updating and things of that sort. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for tuning into this video today, and I apologize for some of my viewers and subscribers if I was a little bit short on videos for the month of May. The month of May was the end of the school year for my college. I'm currently going to San Diego State University, and I am getting my master's in mechanical engineering. So I was wrapping up some classes and some projects, as well as also trying to get my thesis project going, which is still an ongoing process. And I may or may not do a video on that once I know for sure exactly what I'll be doing. But without further ado, the topic of today's video are some new exciting plans and like mini projects going on for the go-kart here. I've built it now, and it's kind of been in the same state for about a year or so, if you don't include the wing project that I had going on. But as far as like performance and just other things with the go-kart, it's been a while since it's been refreshed. So this summer my project is for this go-kart is to kind of refresh this go-kart, add some cool new features and update some things that over the years of driving it that I haven't really liked and I want to change a little bit. So I thought I'd go over some of those ideas with you guys today, and you could provide some feedback on maybe what you guys think. But it'll basically just set the foundation for what's to come in regards to the go-kart. Of course, you know, once this is all done and it's driving again, I definitely want to take it out again like Matt and I did about a month ago and do like an autocross style track again. So that will be fun. But for the meantime, it is going to probably get disassembled to some point and get a good solid refresh. Now, over the past day or so, I kind of stared at the go-kart here and looked at it and said, you know, what are some things that definitely need some updating in regards to, you know, how this thing is built, how it drives, and things like that. So I came up with a list of 9 different things that I think would be viable to add to the go-kart and make it a little bit more refreshed and renewed since I had initially got it on the road a few years ago. But just a quick intro or recap for some possible new viewers here. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is my homemade go-kart that I built completely from the ground up. I designed and built the chassis all myself, did all the welding, or most of it, and basically fabricated, I'd say, 95% of this build here. And it all started from this blue paint tape diagram on the ground here in my garage, and it went from there to a design on the computer, and then the fabrication began. And it took about, I'd say, about 2 years to build this thing. You know, I wasn't working on it completely full time. I was juggling school and life at the same time, but I've had it running for quite a while now, and it's been an awesome go-kart. It's such a blast to drive. My friends love driving it, but definitely I think it is time for some refresh, to update a few things and make it just that much better. Because, you know, as car guys, we always want to make either our cars or our go-karts, in this case, faster or better or look nicer. So that's what we're gonna be doing. And if you're interested, the whole build of this go-kart from the very beginning, where I just have literally a myriad of parts laying on the garage floor, to the final stage of where it's at now, the whole build series is on a playlist on my YouTube channel. So if you click my channel, also hit subscribe while you're at it, because I do a lot of videos with this thing. But you can literally watch this thing get built from the ground up to where it is now, and it's pretty cool. So I currently took the bumpers off of the go-kart just to give myself some room here to think and to look over certain areas that need to be refreshed. And then, like I showed you guys, I came up with my list there on my sticky pad that I thought would be good areas to refresh on this thing and make a little bit better. So that's what the pods look like. Obviously there's another side pod that goes on the other side, but those all mount up via bolts to the main frame. And you know, obviously they don't really add much performance. I mean, maybe that one adds a little bit of aero, but I doubt it, just because it's a go-kart and it's so exposed anyways. But it's really just for looks. And those are actually shifter kart bumpers I got from a website that sells shifter kart parts. So it kind of makes it look like the shifter kart themed go-kart that I want. Granted, it doesn't have a, you know, shifting transmission, but the overall shape and design and how low it is and things like that, and how wide the track is kind of meant to resemble a shifter kart. Now, starting with number 1 on the list here, we have Honda 18-pound valve springs that I got when I got the Stage 1 hop-up kit for my engine, which included the high flow air filter, the racing header, and the carb jet. And so that came with heavier pound valve springs, and that's just something I haven't had the chance to install, and I've been meaning to, but I think it's very important to do that because the governor has been removed on this engine, and you can definitely hear when it starts to get to the you know, limit of the RPMs. And the one thing that you definitely want to make sure of that you don't get at those higher RPMs is valve float. So basically the valves don't actually return to their, you know, fully open or fully closed position, because the the engine is, you know, revving at such a high RPM. They kind of just sit in the middle and vibrate almost, and that has to do with the spring force, the K value on those springs. It just doesn't provide enough force at those high RPMs to fully close those. But since these are heavier pound valve springs, they'll make sure that those valves open and close completely, even at those higher RPMs. So part 2 on my list here is actually to order some new parts here and install them on the engine. I don't want to entirely give it away, but I'm definitely going to be getting a new exhaust header and possibly a few other things. One that better fits the end of the go-kart here, because it fit perfectly with the wing when I had it on, but I want to get a different shape one so it doesn't stick out so far, you know, off the end of the go-kart here. I mean, I guess the air filter does, but when you have the muffler on it, it's even that much longer. So the goal is to find one that I can also order that's a little bit shorter and doesn't stick out so far. But there's also another part I want to order, and some few other things that I'll probably browse on Go Power Sports and see if I can get those, and then I'll install those to kind of, you know, nice up the engine a little bit. Another thing, or one of the things to go with that the new header, sorry, I couldn't find my words there for a second, is some header wrap. So that is heat shield wrap. It's like a fiberglass wrap, fiberglass, or, you know, I don't know exactly what it's made out of, but you basically wrap it around your exhaust header there, and it helps to shield some of the nearby components from some of the heat. So I figured, you know, it's very exposed, so it might not add that much effectiveness, but, you know, might as well try if we can, especially since the intake is right there, and that's the last thing you want is hot, you know, radiating heat from the header here to go towards the intake, and that just doesn't make for a very efficient combustion cycle. You want cold air to go into the combustion chamber. So that'll be some extra parts that I'll be adding on, just some, you know, things here and there to the engine to make it that much better. So part 3 on my list here is to redo the pedal assembly. Now, I've built this pedal assembly completely myself. I bought some sheet metal that's, I believe, 1/8 inch thick sheet metal, and I cut it to size, or I had it cut to size, and then I cut the notch out in the middle for the pivoting arm for the steering column. But the one thing I don't like on this go-kart, and you can see here, is the way the pedals attach. I mean, the way that the pedals attach is fine. It's just they go through this hollow tube here and are held on by collars. But the part that I don't like is the return spring assembly here. So you can see this post that was actually supposed to hold the return spring back is actually bent forward, and from the force of, you know, driving this thing. And I'm not really a fan of how I initially designed it, and this is something I've been wanting to revisit for a while. And I also want to have pedals that are supported from both sides. So, you know, this pedal comes up from this side, goes up, and then it's just, you know, curves over. But what I want is something that comes up from this side and stops about here, and then another one that comes up from this side and stops about here. That might get a little tricky with trying to make sure that they don't come out on the bottom here, because, you know, we had those collars to prevent that. But that'll just be something that I got to figure out when I'm in the middle of it. But I've wanted to revisit the pedal assembly for a while, like I said, for that reason. And then also, when I originally painted this, it might be hard to see on camera, but I actually messed up the painting. Ooh, that's dirty. I sprayed too thick of a coat on, and it actually pooled up right here. And over time, I mean, the paint has actually held up pretty well, because this is right where your feet go when you drive this thing. And there's some scratches here and there from, you know, your feet being on there. So it's actually held up pretty well from the driving that we've done. But I actually used, if you watched my video on when I built this, or actually I didn't make a video on it, I just posted on Instagram. I built this really nice socket organizer for my new toolbox here, and I used this wrinkle finish here, like a truck bed coating, and it's very durable, and you don't need a lot of coats. So I'm thinking of coating the pedal plates with that same truck bed coating, and it also adds, it's textured, so it adds a little bit of grip at the same time, which is what you want for where your feet go. So that is kind of part 3, revisit this, kind of change how the return spring for the brake here and the throttle on that side, it's the same deal on that side. I just want to clean it up a little bit and make it nicer. If I figured out that I can't really make pedals myself, I'll try and order some that fit the bill just as nicely as what I intention for them. But that's kind of another project, mini project number 3 here, is to revisit this pedal assembly and revamp it with new design and some new paint. So the next mini project here, I mean, this isn't really a mini project, it's more of just like some logistics, I guess, but I guess it's for aesthetics too. I want to standardize some of these bolts. For the most part, most of the bolts on this go-kart, and I did this for a reason, are 5/16 as far as diameter goes. So that way you only really need mostly one socket to get most of the bolts on and off on this thing. But as far as standardizing them in terms of length, especially it's not in right now, but the bolts that hold, the 4 bolts that hold this front bumper on, they're way too long, and so if you go over something that's a little bit off the ground, it will hit that and, you know, damage those. So I want to make sure that I get bolts that are all the right length, and maybe get a few bolts, like when I redo the pedal assembly, get some that are a little bit nicer looking, like some, you know, maybe anodized or black ones, who knows, something like that, that are just a little bit prettier and are, you know, not too long. These I think are okay, the ones that hold the suspension arms on there, I think those are okay, but some of the ones that mount to underneath the go-kart, like for the seat, and some of the struts for the seat are a little too long and things like that. So that'll be a little mini project number 4 for the go-kart for this summer. So mini project 5 and 6 kind of go hand in hand with each other, but number 5 I want to do to the go-kart this summer is to get a few different sprockets and change this one in particular, because this one has seen its better days. I don't know how well that comes up on camera, but there's actually a groove cut out of the sprocket because the chain wasn't perfectly aligned, so it kind of ate away at the part of the sprocket, and some of the teeth are pretty thin now. So this does need to get replaced, and I possibly want to mess around with some gear ratios with different sprocket teeth numbers, so to make the go-kart, you know, accelerate faster or have a higher top end speed and things like that. And that leads into one of the biggest things that's been a headache on this go-kart is the chain tension. A lot of go-karts, what they will have is, so this is, what did I say, 5, now this is 6, going off the sprocket here. A lot of go-karts will have an adjustable engine plate. So the plate where the engine mounts to is actually not just holes, there's ovals cut out, and so the engine can slide forward and backward, and that's how you tighten or loosen the chain to get it on and off. But the way that I had designed it, initially I had those ovals in there, but that was the position for when I had the centrifugal clutch. Now when I had to mount the torque converter, I had to shift the whole engine to the left to get it to clear, and that's why I had to cut out that section there. But since then it's been kind of a pain every time you need to tighten the chain, because you know, you have to actually raise the engine up vertically instead of like moving it forward or backward. So what my plan for that is to kind of build a plate that offsets the motor just enough from the current setup so that I can cut some ovals in it to move the engine forward and backward. Granted, we're not dealing with a whole lot of extra room here because the torque converter does you know, expand when you get up to speed. So maybe instead of going left or right, we just have to, you know, build a plate that has some spacers, and then you can shift the engine that way. So we'll see how that goes. That's going to take some thinking and some careful thought, but that is another mini project that I want to do to further just make this a more efficient go-kart, to replace different parts like the sprocket or the chain and whatnot. Alright, so mini project number 7 is to get a new set of tires, at least at the minimum rear tires, because these have some pretty bad dry rot. You can see on the edge here these dry rot. This dry rot's pretty predominant in these tires. Both rear tires have them. The fronts aren't as bad; those are pretty good. But it's the rears that are more concerning, especially because one of them doesn't hold air. So you know, if you don't drive it, you know, if I wanted to drive it every day, I would have to inflate. I believe it's that one with air, which is why I have it sitting on the jack right now so that it doesn't flat spot these tires. So because that one doesn't hold air and there's some dry rot, I definitely want to replace those. I just hate having to do that because anyone that's had to get tires on and off these wheels, it's a pain in the butt, since there's no like tire mounting machine. So I got to figure out how to do that and possibly where to do that and where to get tires from. So if you have a hookup with some racing slick tires for the go-kart here, definitely shoot me a message on Facebook or Instagram, and that would be much appreciated. Otherwise I'll probably shop, you know, go with Power Sports or another website like that to get some new tires. And dry rot is definitely something you don't want to deal with because you know, that could just give way for the tire failing at any time. And especially when I'm driving this thing, like, you know, where we had it at that autocross track set up the other, you know, last month, you know, we're driving it pretty hard. You don't want the tires to go out while you're driving that, and that would be a pretty scary experience. So I want to make sure I keep the go-kart nice and upkept for the most part. Alright, so number 8 and 9 kind of go hand in hand with each other. 8 is a brake cooling system. So because of the way the seat is, and this is just because, you know, I'm an engineer, so I like to just try and design things to make them that much better. But the way that I currently design the brake system with the seat is the brakes sit right behind the seat. So, I mean, this may or may not be super necessary, but it's something to add to it. I think a brake cooling system would be awesome. You know, a lot of race cars have that, and even new production cars have that. Like the new Porsche GT2 RS, for example, has these NACA ducts on the hood where that goes right to the brake lines, or the brake calipers and discs, to help cool them. So something like that, you know, where there's a intake duct here, and then with some tubing that ropes back, and then, you know, an exit duct right onto the top of the caliper and the brake disc there, because that definitely does get very hot, especially when we're driving it hard. So any chance to make this thing a little bit more efficient, and, you know, it'll look cool too to have some tubing going back there. And the other thing that I wanted to do was incorporate a torque converter cooling duct. Same deal, because when you sit on this go-kart, you kind of block a lot of the airflow to it. And one thing I've been wanting to put back on the torque converter here is the cover. It's got the old muffler in it right now, but the cover for the torque converter, because the torque converter belt does wear, and when it does go, you don't want that thing to be whipping you in the back of the head. So I've been wanting to install that back onto the go-kart here, but I've had an issue with the torque converter actually overheating with that on. So ideally what I want to do is cut some sort of, this is for the bottom, so on this side, to cut some sort of opening here with a duct that helps to pour cold air in. And so that again would start on the bottom there with an intake with a tube going up and to that point. So use some sort of tubing I could source locally from Home Depot or a hardware store or something, and build some cooling systems for the brake and torque converter, because the brake really haven't had an issue with, but the torque converter is actually something I have dealt with overheating before, and when it gets hot, it actually eats away the belt that much faster. And I guess lastly, what I would say for the summer refresh for the go-kart is what I'm going to call this. Number 10 is just to go through the go-kart. You know, I'm going to be taking a lot of things off anyways, and re-greasing some things. So, you know, the pillow block bearings that support the rear axle, those have grease fittings, so pumping some new grease into those guys, cleaning them up a little bit because they've got some pretty serious grime on them from driving and from, so, you know, grease slowly leaking out. So just greasing a bunch of things, obviously adding new brake fluid, and you know, bleeding the system there, probably doing an oil change at some point too, and then also just, you know, examining all the welds and making sure we don't have any cracking going on in any of the welds, because since this was a project where I had welded a lot for the first time, I want to make sure that those are still holding up to par for you know, the performance oriented driving we do at this thing a lot of the times. So I want to make sure that none of those welds have cracked, and just go through and clean everything up, you know, wipe it down and grease up some of the things that need grease and, you know, lubricants and stuff like that. Alright guys, so that's pretty much going to cover the update video for the go-kart here. I wanted to again refresh you guys and update you on what the current status is with the go-kart, and what my future plans are here for the summer with it. I have about 10 things like I just listed out that I want to do for it, but of course if you saw anything over the past videos you might have watched, or in this video maybe, that you might think could use some updating, you know, feel free to comment below and I'll take that into consideration. Probably won't do all of them, but if there are some things that catch my attention that I think are, you know, pretty important, you know, I may do those. So I always appreciate your help and appreciate your guys' feedback on these videos. I hope you guys learn something from these videos, and I sometimes learn something from the comments that are left on the videos as well. So thank you so much guys for watching this video. I hope you guys liked it and are excited for some of the updates coming with this go-kart. I know this go-kart I've had for a while, and I've done a lot to it, but I want to make sure it's at tip-top shape, just because, you know, this is kind of the first major project that I ever did on my own in terms of design and fabrication. But I do have something very, very, very cool in the pipeline. I've been saving up for a few years for it and planning a lot to do this project. I won't announce exactly what it is just yet because I want to make sure everything happens the way it does and doesn't fall through. So I'm not going to say too much about it, but it is very exciting and I am so stoked for it. But for now, this go-kart is going to get some refreshing, it's going to get some new parts, and it's going to get some new life, and hopefully maybe get a little bit faster and more efficient here in terms like the cooling and stuff. So thanks again so much for watching, guys. If you haven't already, definitely subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next one.